So one of my getting close to final questions is, and it actually has been asked of me, of my clients many times, I guess, the company perks. Is that part of compensation? Is it part of what I need as an employer, as a owner, to support that person in their job? Whether they're owner or non-owner, good call. Whether they're owner or non-owner, I guess, what are the elements of perks that you believe should be there, shouldn't be there? It's part of the cost to carry for that individual. Jay?
Yeah, that's our perks, frankly, are mostly with the family. And there's some like we have car allowances for salespeople and our key managers.
Okay.
And, there's some expense account, but nothing really more than that.
Okay. Pete? Perks? Less now?
We're a manufacturing company, so probably 95% of our workforce has different needs than probably the two of these guys specifically. So we focus on, it's not golf course memberships. It's the generations are looking for different things, but they want a stable job where they can get a fair amount of hours per week. They're looking for flexible hours. They're looking for a really strong healthcare insurance policy. And we focused heavily on being above market. So when we're competing for people for those types of jobs, that it's higher in the market, because that's really what drives our business. We have put very little effort into like the management level, but I'm sure there's a huge benefit. It's just the 90% or 95% of our workforce that really takes care of us. That's where we've always put our effort.
Great. Alan, how about you?
It's funny, perks become mundane very quickly. So, there are certain things that are cultural perks. We do trips.
Sure.
We do those kinds of things for our top salespeople. We try to have fun. That's about the best perk we can offer sort of everybody else. And so whether it's a party or whether it's Gene days or, so it's more lifestyle oriented than it is a car or a laptop or, everyone who needs mobility, they get it. I don't think any of them consider it a perk after about 10 seconds,
Sure.
right? It's because
It's
now all of a
becomes the norm.
sudden it was a perk when I got that iPhone until I had to answer it at 8 o'clock at night. Then it's not a perk anymore. It's
Or on
all of a
vacation
sudden,
or wherever, yeah, sure.
So I don't disagree with sort of the philosophy of all those things, but I do think it's important to have fun, and we try to spend some time at it. Yeah. Sometimes we're better at it than others, and of course if you're having a good year, it's a lot easier to spend the money and have fun. But this year we're having a year-long contest, and I can tell you that in sometime January, February, March of next year, we'll have this big blowout party where people will get to spend all the phony dollars that they're collecting, and we'll have auctions, and we did it a couple of years ago, and that seems to turn our people on more than anything else that we do, aside from the trips.
I think there's a blurred line too. It's funny listening to you two, both of you guys, was between perks and benefits.
Right.
And so one of the best benefits that we do for a company, we have a very young demographic for the majority of our staff, is when they get married, we give them an extra 5 days of vacation time, right? So when people start out and they get 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they get an extra 5 days. It's like, yeah, it's a great trip and you're doing this, but it's not for Christmas and it's not to go see your grandmother or your nephew who was born. So that's a benefit, but I guess in some ways it would be a perk. And the other is we give 10 days bereavement for an immediate family member, meaning parent, sibling, child. And the goal, we've never had anybody want to use it, but when you have these, you have to create employee handbooks because you always have somebody who takes advantage of the situation. And by putting a really, and I've never had, I don't even think somebody would take 10 days, obviously if it was a child or something, but to say, we're not going to dock you if an immediate family member passes away. And those are little things that when you tell people about it, it's kind of like a smile comes in their face, and a twinkle in their eye, like, wow, those are nice perks. And we do the same thing as Alan does with contests and parties and things like that. It helps.
That you can leave with the group, whether it's a to do or not to do, that is the question, related to compensation. And I'm going to see if any of them want to go first, or I will use my infamous word, which is they'll be voluntold to participate. So few key words, whether it's a to-do or not to-do, doesn't need to even be either of those. Whether it's a best practice, just a few words on what you might leave with the group. Anybody want to jump? Jay?
Thank you. I guess I picked the wrong seat
You
here.
did. I'm left-handed, so I always go left. I'm always veering left.
Well, I guess what comes to mind, you talk about philosophy is, we got, in the recession, we got rid of the automatic raises. The legacy was, if you're a warm body, we prided ourselves on long-term employees, and it became an entitlement type mentality. So we've gotten rid of that, and we're in 2008, 2009, when we were hitting the abyss, we went to an incentive-based program. So we have a nice bonus program that's pretty much based on our sales targets, and that's worked out pretty well.
And that's from front office, back office, all the way through?
Yes, all the way through the company.
Yep. Tom?
I would say accountability and communication.
Very strong words today. Yep. Alan?
Well, I think we used both my words, which were alignment and transparency. So
Yeah.
I guess I would encourage people to look at things, are you aligned, and can everyone see,
What that is.
what we're doing?
My little note taker over here.
Keeps my
It's
thoughts
good.
clear.
I know. He's always doing that. It's great.
Compensation drives behavior, and you have to be very thoughtful about what you want the result to be, because how you choose to set that up will affect the company based on how you set up their compensation program.
That's so great, because
Yes.
it's amazing to me how people can, the smartest people will figure out how to manipulate the compensation plan if you've left it open for manipulation. And I think everything you do, two things. One is to do them prospectively. So you start hearing what they're thinking before you do it, and you can fix it before it happens. So if you can announce it far enough in advance, and also make sure, don't do anything and say, this is how it's going to be for forever. That you have to have some
There is no
flexibility.
forever. Yep.
Right.
Yep. So at this time, the floor is open. Does anybody have any questions for any of the panelists? Yes.
When you're hiring key personnel these days, very often you find a resume that's been manicured and polished. You find a candidate who's been counseled in how to interview. And I'm wondering, have they also been schooled in how to deal with family business idiosyncrasies? And if they've been schooled in what to ask for in terms of compensation and perks and things like that, are we seeing that kind of sophistication?
I don't believe so. I think that you do get candidates that are crafting it and going through it, but I'm amazed by some of the, at this point, no matter what the salary is, I'm always amazed at the amount of honesty the candidates will give you if, as an interviewer, you spend the time with them. When you're hiring, whenever I have a client that's hiring for need out of desperation, then they lead the candidate with what they want to hear, and they don't press on the issues. And when I see a client that's willing to really spend time and invest in the process and explore it, it's almost to a fault that you can lead somebody into stepping in a giant pothole and to find out what the honesty is. But as far as what the issues are with family businesses, I think if they've been in a family business, they understand the nuances. I mean, it really doesn't take, not to dumb down anything or insult anybody, but I'm a big believer in most situations, career-wise, that 80% of things are the same, and there's a 20% variation. And where I find most people make problems for themselves is thinking that 20% is the same and 80% is so unique to them. And it's just, I don't see that being the case.
Any other questions? Can you stand up?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Alan, I had a question about your excuse me, I have a cold. I have a question about your Phantom Stock program. What mechanism do you have in place with the Phantom Stock program as people would either be leaving or getting to a retirement point?
So that's a great question. We use 5 times earnings as a way to sort of peg the value of the shares or the units. I can't call them shares, of the units. And so at retirement, if we'll just use really simple numbers. If if the company was, earnings were $100,000 and now they were $1 million, and you got some on the way up, you're basically increased by 90%. They're 10 times valuable. You subtract out what you got them for, and so the value is sort of pegged at 5 times earnings. So they will get something, but it won't be the same as if we actually sold for, 8 times adjusted earnings, which is going to be a very different number. And so there is a way for them to get out, and there is a vesting schedule, and it's a long one. It's 10 years, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. So with each allocation, but at I want to say something like 55 and 20 years of service, or 65 and 10 years of service, it all vests anyway. And at a transaction, it all vests. So, which is really the key. The whole thing was built around if there's a transaction. So, did I answer your question? Okay.
There are some questions over here. Liz will get the mic to you. Could you stand up, please? Thank you.
Hi, Jay Goltz. Many of us have more than one kid in the family, or potentially have more than one kid in the family. I'm just getting to that, maybe, maybe not. And it seems to me the biggest problem out there it can't really be addressed by this panel, because you sold the family business, you have no kids in the business, and the two of you have somehow magically ended up with all of your brothers. Everybody's just one big happy family splitting the pie, and I'm feeling like I have a hard time believing that none of the sister-in-laws, nobody anywhere, because the ones I know of, the businesses I know of, one brother likes to golf a lot, and the other brother gets to work really early and works really hard, and there's a lot of tension there between, why don't you stop golfing so much, because I could use some help back here. So I'm wondering, truth or fantasy, and does anyone have any answer to that? Because I haven't heard anything that I can get my arms around. How do you handle it when it's not about trust, it's about value? What if one brother or sister is really talented and works like a maniac and really drives the value of the company, and the other one not so much?
I'll try to answer that. I mean, the fact of the matter is that most of that is going to be reflected in profit, not in compensation, so that if you as a dad or my dad gifted to us or sold to us in equal shares, we're all going to share equally, even though there's sort of a disequal pull on the rope. But in terms of having that conversation, I was giving you the truth. My brothers and I have a bond and a trust and and to be honest with you, I don't have to be in the office. I could work 3 half days a week, and it would be the same as the fact that I'm there 8 hours a day. Nothing would really change. But I tend to show my face more because I know that they can't do that. So that's on me as part of this team to say, you know what? Yeah, I could go play golf and no one would miss me and there's nothing that wouldn't get done. I tend to work really hard for 3 months and then sort of put the plans in place, and then I just need to measure it and see how we're doing. But I can't act that way in the office. So I do think that there's always that risk. And I think if my brothers and if there was one brother that was just lights out, we would have a conversation. I have one brother that says to this day, if he had stayed in sales, he'd be making much more money than the role he took. And I always say to him, that's correct, but you wouldn't have the equity that you have. So you got to look at it from both sides of this and understand it. And there are times he said, well, I'll trade the equity, just pay me another X and I'd be happy. So I get the point of the question, but I think that's why nothing's forever. You have to be flexible. I think you have to have dialogue. You have to have communication. And it gets probably even harder if everyone's not in the business.
Don't you believe that when your father's passed on, that dynamic might change and your brother might go, no, I really want that extra compensation?
Well, my father being there or not being there now has nothing to do with it because he's not involved in the business.
Still present.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have some insight. So the the fact is that if it were to happen, we would have that discussion. We would probably be willing to create metrics to say, if we can show that you can do that, I'd be silly not to pay for it because I'm going to benefit from it. And so if I'm going to pay you another $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $500,000, but you're going to make me do X times that, I think, 10X or whatever. In fact, by the way, your daughter has a place in my business.
She'd be very good.
Yeah. I mean, we're waiting for her. We've got an internship all lined up.
If I can add, because I mean, from a serving my client perspective, I have this conversation lots of times because families tend to be dysfunctional, right, to levels of efforts and things like that, yet it's an ownership. And I think one of the things that I try to share with our clients is that there's compensation for performance, for doing the jobs and duties and the things that you need to do. And if you are an owner, then there's returns on your investment. And when you bundle them into one big pile of how much I get paid every year on my W-2, I think that's the misnomer. I think you really need to slice it at least down the middle, and you may even have a couple more slices of the pie. But you have to take that ownership, return on investment, or return on inheritance, whatever.
That's
Yeah, I mean, you have to take two different positions with it because compensation is arbitrary. And if everybody has the same focus, and I point to Jay because they're very focused at Standfast Packaging, very focused. If everybody stays focused to the end game, to the plan, to the strategic plan, because then it becomes not about us as brother, sister, who one works hard and one doesn't. If the company can become profitable through all of the collective efforts, not only of ownership, but of all of our people, and we can create a culture by which people really want to contribute and participate in those profits, pay me minimum wage. I'll be happy on that return on investment if I can build the company's asset. So it's a function of really, and that's what family businesses have a really hard time with. And a lot of my clients have, is you have to determine what's the compensation for that position, marketability. If I have to replace you tomorrow, I'm going to save money. Right? If I got to replace you tomorrow, I'm way overpaying you, which means I'm way overpaying you. And I really need to look at what's the return on investment so that we all can share in that. Because if we're all pulling the company, we're all stripping it out of all of our compensation, there's going to be nothing left in equity for the company to build an asset.
I actually have a client that's about $35 million in revenue, manufacturing company, and all of the second generation is not involved. And they have a hired gun CEO. And one's an artist, and one's out of state, and one's a homemaker, and they're not involved in the business. They sit on the board, and they get in confrontation about let's sell it, and the other one, we got good cash flow, right? So even when they're not involved and there's no performance-based issues,
You're going to have that.
there's issues, right? So I'm just
And
to your
I
point.
really think.
I just want to say, we're in a pretty good place right now, but I mean, it's been a long, arduous
Long,
journey.
yes.
And we've had some tough conversations and we've had to deal with a lot of issues, so. Yeah, but he's not involved in the business. But,
People make
Yeah.
peace until,
Yeah.
it's
I
just
mean,
like, it's just like the
you're-
Corleone family.
Believe
No,
me.
I think you're right.
believe me, yeah,
I think you're right.
there's always issues, so.
Yes.
I do think
Sure.
the onus is on from an estate planning standpoint, this is really what this gets down to, is being very clear in what the objectives are. And then most of the stuff can go away. If the idea of giving everyone equal shares in the business, but yet only one person's in it, I've never, in all the clients I can think of, in all my relationships, and all the peer group things I've been in, I can't think where that ever has worked to somebody's advantage, or to everybody's advantage. So I think, having a really clear plan about what you want to have happen, or if you even want to be in control of what happens, but understanding who should be in control, I think that's much more important than, whether one person's going to be pulling on the rope harder than another.
And the one thing you mentioned when you said in-law, and I think that is, especially when you bring kids, with my clients a lot, they bring kids into the business in their mid-20s or early 20s out of college, and they're single. And then they get married, and then you're a different person when you're 30 than you are when you're 25. And all of a sudden you've got, and it could be, it's not gender-based, it could be either, but
Either side, sure.
a son-in-law or daughter-in-law who's whispering and saying, why are you working so hard? And even if they're not having the golf issue, just a perception, you bring in all the revenue, but all he does is manage the office. And you get,
Well, and
Well, but that, again, you can
Yeah.
get around that
I've been
if you
through that.
gifted correctly.
I think one of the important things too is to have family meetings. You must, to the transparency point, you've got to educate the family members, the people who aren't there every day, the spouses, the kids. There's a number of families in the CFBC that I know have great family meetings, and they're quarterly, or they're semi-annual, or they're retreat aspects. That whether it's a half a day, whether it's a weekend, whatever it is, to have that communication takes away, I think, takes away the ambiguities, takes away opinions, and it's more factual. This is how we're doing. This is who's participating. This is how the company is doing, and the education. So it's not just me coming home from my day of work and complaining in my husband's ear about X, Y, and Z. You know, he may show up and participate in my family meeting, if you will, if I had a family business. But that's the kind of education, communication is really important so that you can dismiss some of those ambiguities. Another question? Thank you.
So, what you said sort of answered a question I've been sitting here the whole time listening to you guys. Thinking is, you know, I happen to be an owner in a family business, much smaller than probably most people's here. But, you know, I think of my compensation as salary and profit or distribution. And I sit here and nod my head at the market salary. I mean, my total compensation, salary versus ownership or profits, salary is a very small chunk of it.
Yep.
And, you know, I agree to that. But when you have a family member who's coming into the business, and how do you know, everybody splits their salary, but I'm guessing not everybody's ownership is, you know, 100% divided by 4. And how do you deal with that? And amongst the family members or the brothers, you know, don't you look at that as your compensation? And, you know, how people view part of your salary as the amount of profit you get out of your business.
Anybody want to respond to that?
We took the approach, I can talk,
Sure.
that we didn't really take a distribution based on relative to ownership. So we really took distributions to pay taxes, is really the way we looked at it. So, and then it's changed from generation to generation. It depends on the size of your business and what you can support. So you might not be able to support people, you might be able to. It's all relative to how much money you can potentially make. So as it's gone and our company's grown, we have more flexibility in terms of salaries up front out of the gate. But even for me, starting 15 years ago, we were not close to what we were today. So it was a little bit different of an animal. So it's a challenging thing for sure as you go through it, but you have to have the scale to be able to even justify bringing somebody on board.
I would answer it a little different. I think the best thing that ever, well, we had a lot of best things. One of the best things that ever happened to us was having the first non-family owner. And it caused us to run the business differently and think about it differently. And my brothers would say, how come we don't take raises? And I'm like, well, would you rather have a raise or would you rather have our percentage of the profit? And start to look at things like that. Which one is really bigger? Because if we took a raise, all the guys that were at our level were going to take the same raise. And then we were splitting it a lot more than 88% of the profits that were coming to the family. And just running your business like a business. I mean, I think that's the best advice I can give you. I'm not sure I understood exactly what the pressure point of the question was. But if you run your business no different than the biggest business you can think of, you will probably get to some very good answers, as opposed to running it like, well, I make, you know, $200,000 and 50,000 of it is in salary and 150,000 of it. Think of it as, you know, that I get paid $50,000 to do what I do, or 100,000 or 250,000, doesn't matter. That's what I get to run the business. And because I own it, whether it was inheritance, whether I bought it, whether I started it from scratch, my return on equity comes out in the form of those distributions. And from a tax standpoint, you know, you should be consulting with Deanna or whoever your consultant is to talk about which way am I better off?
Right.
How's
When-
that for a commercial? The best one I could give you.
There was no payment of, for any services there. Any other questions before we wrap up? Everybody's getting a little thirsty, a little antsy, right? There's one in the back. One more. Megan's running.
My dad and uncle and aunt own the company, and my aunt just owns a small portion. I've got 2 sisters and a cousin that are coming in, and we're going to be 4th generation. But my aunt has a couple kids. One of them's currently working for us. The other one might possibly come in. And I guess as the 4th generation owners, like, we know what we have to do to keep the business running.
Yes.
But her kids don't have exactly the same work ethic as we do. And I don't know how to, or we don't know how to get them to understand that either they need to be treated they want to be treated like a family member, but they don't put in the extra work. So we don't quite know how to go about telling them that either they need to put in the extra work to get the extra benefits, or they're just going to be treated like a normal employee.
I think our 4th gen.
Yeah.
I've been exactly there, same exact place. I've been exactly in the same situation, and really it comes down to you choosing: are you going to put up with it or not? Am I going to say,
tough
hey, this
conversations.
is total BS, you
That's
need
right.
to step up and help us, or you have to deal with it. So the thing I learned very quickly is you need to have the courage if you want it to change. If you don't want to take it on, then you just need to bite your tongue and deal with it. So that's a hard thing to do with family, but if you just have the conversation, it's a really hard thing to do. But if you have the conversation with respect, and it really is to take care of your business so you can take care of your family, it shakes itself out. And that's the way we dealt with it. There's blood, sweat, and tears associated with that, but I think it's the only way to do it.
And sometimes you get to the point where everybody sees the family business as the money tree, right? I've got, I already have my graduate certificate into the, ABC company without having done anything, worked for anything, worked outside, done anything to earn that. And I think what I try to tell my clients is that if we can stay focused on what's best for the business, for the company, we're all just workers here. We're all just employees here. And there is no, benefit of ownership. As a matter of fact, as an ownership, you've got risk. You've got a significant amount of risk. That as an employee, I just can come in and do my job and leave at the end of the day. When you're in ownership position, there's risk. So I think those really hard conversations are critical. You got to have them. And sometimes having somebody mitigate those discussions for you, having somebody else be the one to kind of be there to supervise that conversation, whether it be your accountant or your attorney or somebody like that, just to mitigate it so that there's not a lot of swearing and slamming of doors and things like that, that usually if there's the outside professional there, they'll be a little bit more curt in doing that. So we're gonna wrap it up, if you will. Just bear me one more minute here. So we hope that today's conversation sparked some best practices, and I'm glad we finally got to your answers after an hour and a half of making you sitting there. But I think some of the great things that I learned from these guys, these are my takeaways from today. A well-clarified formula and job description can help you provide a structure that is understood by all owners and non-owners. Pulling together market research and on an ongoing basis may lead you to retool your pay structure, meaning nothing is permanent forever. Fitting all owners and executive compensation into the overall strategic plan, as Jay's family has done, keeps the organization focused on what's best for all. It's got to be best for all. It can't be just best for one person. So there's no single answer here. Sorry, no fairy dust. We don't have the one, but hopefully you've gotten a nugget from today, some best practices, some things that you can bring back to your company and try to implement. This board's a great idea. Alan's got some copies of some fresh copies of some of his formulas, and certainly welcome to come up and talk to the panelists after we leave. So a lot of things are going to depend on what where your company is at, the stage of its growth, your relatives, the relatives coming into their career paths, your competitors' strengths. If your competitors are sweeping up your competition, it may even be sweeping up your family members too. And also your need for capital. Some businesses are very capital intensive. you need to leave the money in the company. You can't be taking it out for ownership. At the CFBC, there's a library of experiences, hundreds and hundreds of years of experiences. And we thank you for participating today, and let's give our panelists a warm thank you.